you know,
Yeah.
going over.
So here we go. Yeah.
Going over.
All right, here we go, everyone, inshallah. So we were doing from Tafsir al-Qurtubi, Surah al-Ma'idah, and we actually were talking about one of the scholars. His name is Abu Abdullah al-Tirmidhi. And we said that Abu Abdullah al-Tirmidhi is different than Abu Isa al-Tirmidhi. Abu Isa al-Tirmidhi is basically the scholar that we famously know as the narrator in the hadith. So we would talk about Rawahu al-Tirmidhi, for example. That's Abu Isa al-Tirmidhi. This is Abu Abdullah al-Tirmidhi, and we talked about him earlier, and we were quoting at least some of the things that al-Dhahabi was talking about him, and he was basically going over some of the different things that he had quoted. The last thing that we had quoted was this quote, and we said قال that the salah خمسة في خمسة. So the salah, or at least the perfection, or we're speaking about the discipline, not perfection, but discipline. 5 for 5. We said number 1, he said صلاح الصبي في المكتب, that the discipline for a child is في المكتب, in other words, in school. صلاح الفتى في العلم. Al-fata is an adolescent. So we're speaking about an adolescent. So we're talking about somebody that is within the age of adolescence. So we're talking about 13, I assume. 13 and up until perhaps 20. That's going to be al-fata. Okay. So al-fata fil ilm, seeking ilm is the way to get them into discipline. Salahul kahli fil masjid, and the discipline for an elderly. When we're talking about al-kahl, we're talking about somebody that is in an older age. And salahul mar'ati fil bayt, and the discipline for a woman is basically within her home. And salahul mu'dhi fil sijn, and the person that is harming others, or at least the person that is not, let's say, disciplined, whether probably stealing, maybe perhaps harming others, etc., then in that situation, that person, whether we're speaking about harming other people's property, harming other people, or perhaps even harming themselves sometimes, that person, in order to discipline them, it's not enough to give them lectures and to tell them about how important it is to abide by Islam, and how if they don't do the right thing, that it's going to harm their future and all of that stuff, because it's just going to be white noise for them. When it's going to be white noise for them, you just have to recognize that at certain times, we have to take certain, let me say, strong measurements. And here he was saying, well, the measurement that we should be taking is probably imprisonment, probably even according to Islam, some things actually require that we would do corporal punishment, that is physical punishment. But of course, that's, we're talking about either parenting, or we're talking about perhaps the government itself. وسئل عن الخلق, actually سئل عن الخلق, سئل عن الخلق. So this one, الخلق, what we're speaking about, mannerisms, that the worst of the mannerisms is basically when a person would present themselves at a certain, I guess, a certain noble level, when in reality, they don't actually live or contain that. So they're claiming to be, for example, in place of education, when in reality, they're probably the farthest from it, or probably presenting themselves as they are very prestigious, very rich, and all of that. And certainly, especially in the times that we're living in, with all that social media, it's all about being fake in our presentation. It's all about giving somehow a presentation of being educated, or being probably beautiful, or probably being, hey, the religious, or whatever it is, when in reality, our our lifestyle is not at that level whatsoever. So we're speaking about certainly at a time when the society is, I would say, giving us the spaces to bring about some social presentation, some social acceptance, some social presentation that is far from reality. That is far from reality, and certainly that is the worst of mannerisms. If that is the worst of mannerisms during that time, then certainly during our times, with all the social media, with all the filters and all those different things, it actually made the fake presentation, the self-manipulation, even, let me say, stronger than ever before, which actually makes us recognize sometimes the realities that we are really living in fakeness. We're really making lies and manipulating ourselves. And then when we recognize such a reality, we basically get hit that that's not who you really are. You recognize that you're lying. You recognize you're self-manipulating yourself and manipulating others as well. And certainly that's the worst of al-akhlaq. And let's continue right here. But I wanted to say one thing. I want you to look at this one. Here he says, قال أبي عبد الرحمن السلمي أخرج الحكيم من ترمذ. Hold on, where is Tirmidh? So Tirmidh, right now it's in Uzbekistan. And in Uzbekistan, of course, Tirmidh or Tirmiz, in how they would like to say it, okay, Tirmidh actually was considered as, think of it as Harvard today. I know you're thinking of Harvard as being an educational institution, but at the time, whether we're speaking about Tirmidh or we're speaking about, other places and other cities in Uzbekistan, the whole city would be the institution, kind of like a college campus. Okay, so we're speaking about Tirmidh pretty much being an institution of education, even though it's a city, but you're speaking about the adults, the children, everyone there. They would adhere to this city, but in reality, this is an area of, let's say, everybody is really part of this institution. So you would be seeing the students basically going to the classes, and certainly probably the restaurants are to provide for the students. So it becomes a huge college campus right there on in this city, and that was Uzbekistan. So whether we're speaking about Bukhara, we're speaking about Tirmidh, we're speaking about Sajistan, we're speaking about those cities, we're basically talking about university campuses, literally where they would be gathered for different sciences in Islam. Different sciences, to study fiqh, to study hadith, to study other sciences as well. So they become college campuses. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is that during our times, there's a specific institution, and this institution is to keep track of the students, their attendance, and all of the different things. At the time, they did have similar tracking and record keeping, but it was more open. So even if the students were not necessarily, let's say, registered as part of the institution, the classes were available for the public to hear. Okay, so just keep that one in mind. When you leave and you keep these institutions, or at least these places, open for the public to join, that was making more and more students intrigued to join those classes, and it becomes this, let's call it collective education within that city. So you would see this kind of ilm where the baker is a person that is already a alim, because hey, he's walking down the streets and he's listening to this class, and he's probably having the students review, he's hearing them review the classes. So they all become part of this institution, whether I guess they would definitely vary in their capacity and the amount of how much they had basically learned, but everybody within the city basically becomes kind of like a college student. But you want to keep in mind that during our times, the institutions, they more work in semester style. At the time, no, it wasn't a semester style. It was, we're going to be taking, for example, tafsir, and we're going to be completing from A to Z this book of tafsir, this book of usul, this book of fiqh, whatever it is that they're studying. It's going to be completing the whole curriculum. It's going to be completing the whole book, A to Z. So it's not necessarily that, okay, we went that far, we got that far with our fiqh, we're just going to be tested within that. No, you would have to take the whole curriculum, and it's not necessarily whatsoever a semester style, and the whole pedagogy is completely different. It's taking everything related to it, and the teacher is going to be testing all the students. So if we're talking about Quran, everybody has to finish all the Quran. Everybody has to finish everything that relates to Nahu, to Tafsir, whatever it is. And if somebody is left behind, well, that's it. They're going to be left behind. They're not going to make it. And they would have to all, of course, support one another. And that becomes, you either make it and you have to every single day, you have to keep up with your homework, or else you're going to be left behind and you're not going to make it. Okay, so I want to say one thing. He said, "Akhrijul Hakima min Tirmidh." He was basically saying, well, there was an order to get Al-Hakim out of Tirmidh. That is kind of, think of it, yes, it's a city, but it was like a college campus. And one thing is that it said, وَشَهِدُوا عَلَيْهِ بِالْكُفْرِ. I want you to look at this one, that they had witnessed that he had committed kufr. Does that necessarily mean that he had left the religion, Islam? The answer is no. It could be just one item that he was probably accused of. And what is that accusation in relationship to? It is, "Inna lil awliya'i khataman kal anbiya'i lahum khatam." That was the sentence. So that was the sentence that they basically had said, that got him out of the fold of Islam, when he had said that al-awliya. Who are al-awliya? Al-awliya, equivalent. I mean, the most accurate English translation to the word awliya is probably saints. But the word saint, I mean, in a Christian or a theological sense, in theology, it has its own definition. At least there's a certain etymology, there's a certain, I guess, a certain lexicon that comes with the word saint. But let me just break it down, as in Islam, it's completely different. In Christianity, the saint is usually chosen, and they are presented, well, especially if you're talking about Catholicism, I guess the story is different. In Catholicism, the saint is usually presented, usually at least by other saints. They would endorse that person that they're a saint, and they would probably be endorsed also by some kind of a miracle, some kind of miracles that other saints would probably present, that this person is a saint and so forth, and probably a certain bishop or a certain probably a person in the hierarchy. Within that hierarchy, they would present them as saints. In Islam, the story is different. Okay, so the story is different when we say somebody is a saint. First of all, we cannot necessarily be definitive in saying this person is a saint, because we don't really know whether this person's khatima, whether this person, when they die, whether they're really going to be on that commitment and on that steadfastness that they had probably presented. Okay, that's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to judge. So we don't really know who the wali is, but in, I would say, the area of Sufism, there was probably a wider, so I want you to focus on this one. In the area and in the field of Sufism, al-awliya were usually perhaps endorsed by other people, other Muslimin, that they would say, well, this person in Sufism, they would usually have different degrees, usually 33 different maqamat, different degrees, and then they would basically present, well, this person is at the maqam of this, or maqam al-kashf, and, just different maqamat that they would consider that this person had reached. And you want to keep in mind that Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi was Sufi, so certainly, I guess this area of choosing or endorsing a certain person to being a wali, that's definitely something that was, I guess, commonly known within the fields of Sufis, and they would consider that, hey, this person had been committed to the faith, this person had shown their steadfastness, had shown their commitment on dhikr, commitment on probably piety, commitment on staying away from haram, commitment on doing sunan, commitment on perhaps maybe living away from the different fitan. And this commitment would be something that other salihin would endorse, that this is what we had seen in this person. And sometimes they could consider that this person had shown this commitment greatly, and therefore they might label them as wali. Okay. So, but we wouldn't really know if this person is a wali until they would die as a wali. But in the field of Sufis, sometimes they can endorse somebody as a wali, and this really had brought a lot of problems, but still, I'm just
Yeah, couldn't they be like munafiq and nobody knows?
absolutely, it can happen.
Yeah.
So in the world of Sufis, you did have some were probably endorsed as a wali and then ended up really using their endorsement as a way to probably maybe abuse women, maybe abuse even children, maybe abuse perhaps this endorsement to get around with things that wasn't necessarily everybody, but we would say, during our time, especially, this had become more common. People using this type of endorsement, this hat to hide behind, perhaps behind, I guess, faith and this kind of endorsement. And then people would probably never think of this person to ever committing probably any, let's call it illicit behavior, or at least wrong behaviors. And you just want to keep in mind, this isn't necessarily all of those that were endorsed as awliya, but I would say this does happen. This does happen, but of course, those that are true awliya, unfortunately, their image was distorted by those that had worn the awliya hat and didn't really deserve it. Okay. So just wanted to note that one. And unfortunately, we had seen in our community where some of Quran teachers probably, let's just say inappropriate fondling, inappropriate behavior with children, with girls, etc., and hiding behind the wali hat when they didn't really deserve that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't any awliya. Just to note, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man aada li waliyan faqad aadhantuhu bil harb." Whoever is opposing or at least it holds animosity towards a wali, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be the one to defend this wali. Okay, so is a wali at the level of a prophet? So Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi was basically accused of giving some form of at least endorsement or a great, let's call it exaggerated endorsement to the awliya, where sometimes, was it a hyperbole? Was it what really happened? That was an accusation, okay? And it can happen that some scholars may perhaps say a metaphor or give a hyperbole, and then it would be misunderstood. And then the accusation of those that misunderstood, didn't hear directly of what he really had said, it circulates. And then with this type of circulation, it basically becomes a dangerous accusation. So he was accused of committing kufr, not to mean that he had left Islam per se, but to mean that for this quote, that he had probably gave an exaggerated endorsement for the awliya, where he was accused of saying that just as al-anbiya have like a station where there's no other prophet that comes after him, or there's a certain seal that these prophets were given, that that awliya were also given the same thing. Now, of course, the sister was saying, yeah, some will also claim that their ancestry probably goes to Al-Hasan wal-Hussein. That's a different story, okay? That's a different story, because there are some people there that, you know, that have their ancestry, their lineage goes back to the Prophet ﷺ, okay? But just by having your ancestry and you being called part of maybe Sharif or Al-Ashraf, etc., or at least from Bani Hashim or probably Qurashi, etc., that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is a wali, okay? A wali is not a lineage. Al-wali is a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's something that we would not really know unless the person dies on salah. But here's one thing. Let's just say this person, hey, we had seen some things that probably give us some form of flags that this person is really a salih person. Let's just give examples to it. Let's say this person, hey, they were always reading Quran, and this person had really shown signs of, let's just say, not farasa, but no, it's something even farther. This person, you know, we even saw miracles that happened to this person, karamat. Okay, sometimes can these karamat actually happen during our time? Certainly, such karamat can happen. Okay, the karamat in generally are supposed to be hidden. In other words, if let's say you got a karama, hey, you were sitting under a tree reading Quran, and all of a sudden, I don't know, you got the tree to move over your head when you read the Quran or something like that. Let's just, you know, something extraordinary. So this is what we mean by karama. Okay, a karama is basically something extraordinary / miracle, all right, that basically happens to somebody that is salih, okay, a pious person, person that's committed to the deen. Generally speaking, keeping that karama as personal and not showing it to others is supposed to be is supposed to be the behavior, or at least what we're supposed to be doing. Yet, it can happen that a karama can happen to people, right? And in front of people. For example, we're speaking about a karama where perhaps this person was probably, hey, giving a khutbah. Okay. And here, he's right there giving khutbah in front of everyone. And then all of a sudden, he gets this inspiration that, that someone is going to come and attack the masjid. Okay. So here he is, he got the inspiration that someone's going to come and attack the masjid. So all of a sudden, he's right there at the pulpit. And then all of a sudden, he says, close the masjid, close the masjid. And then everybody is confused. Well, we just closed the masjid. And he was just right there at the pulpit. He didn't get a text message, nothing there, but he just got an inspiration that something bad is going to happen. Close the masjid. And then all of a sudden, we discover that there was an attempt to perhaps come into the masjid, shoot at the masjid, or the people that were praying or something like that. Is this right there in front of everybody? That was in front of everybody. Okay, so this would be a karama. Okay, did he necessarily get a wahi per se? It wasn't a wahi. Well, I mean, it's a wahi in terms of the general meaning, but not necessarily the wahi that we would mean as Jibreel alayhi salam. Okay, so when the point that I'm trying to make for al-awliya, certainly there can be awliya. These awliya, they would get certain karamat. It doesn't have to always happen, but we could definitely see from their behavior that they're showing signs of commitment to the deen. So the sister is saying, what if it's an intuition that you're always right, etc.? So an intuition, I guess it's a form of getting, sometimes it can be confused with wahi. Yes, certainly in the general sense, or at least let's say in at least not the technical meaning of wahi, but at least the verbal, or at least the wording of al-wahi to mean a fast message, a sense of feeling. All right, just like when we talked about the word wahi, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give for the bees, or probably for different animals, or perhaps awha Rabbil Alameen for Musa, etc. Just gave her a certain intuition. In the general meaning of wahi, certainly that intuition can be a wahi, but we cannot depend on that to somehow think that this person is spoken to by God. Okay, this is the dangerous area. This is the dangerous area, and this is where a lot of that innovation happens within, of course, Islam, or at least Muslims, not Islam, but within Muslims, is that a person can claim that they had an intuition, and if this intuition, or let's say inspiration, whatever word they use, all right, was contradicting what Islam says, in other words, what Islam had or said, whether in Quran and Sunnah, then this is not a wali, but an imposter. Okay, this is an imposter. So keep that in mind. I did actually have a case where this person, they were actually called the Green Brothers from UK. They came to Palestine. At least one of them did. His name was Abul Qasim, and he was part of a Sufi group from the Naqshbandi Tariqa. I guess the people in UK will know, with Sheikh Nazim al-Haqqani. They have not only in UK, but Cyprus, in New York as well, in several other places. And there was a guy, his name is Abul Qasim. He was from Palestine, dressed in green and all of that. And then this person was claiming that he was a wali, and that somehow he would, of course, get married to these women even before their iddah. He would tell them that he was given an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he was supposed to marry this man's wife or whatever, and that he has to divorce her because there's going to be a great mission that they're going to be doing and all of that. This is just an example. Definitely a womanizer, and I guess abusing this ignorance, and usually is played, I would say, on reverts, on people that really want to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but are not educated about Islam. Those would usually be their victims. So it's children, women, especially women, and especially revert women. So that would be usually the area of their victims, because they know that if it's a person that really knows Islam, they would know Islam better, and they would recognize that just by you contradicting what is actually in Quran and Sunnah, that's the biggest flag. That's the evidence that this person is an imposter. This person is putting on a hat of piety just to fake others. You know, it's kind of like when you see Shaitan, he comes to you presenting himself as, hey, I'm trying to give you a good nasiha. I'm trying to give you a good advice. I'm trying to basically keep you safe, keep you secure, blah, 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 all of that. And of course, in order to play the game that you are a good advisor, you basically usually see these people putting on a hat of religion, or a hat of being doctors, or a hat of probably being business people dressed in suits or whatever. So usually it comes in Shaitan hiding behind either a turban, or probably even a robe, or probably even, behind probably, yeah, a lot of these narcissists are actually politicians, doctors, and engineers, and yeah, they can, and even shuyukh. Okay, so just keep that one in mind. And in here, there were other scholars that defended Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi, Abu Abdullah, and they said, well, such a claim, even a person that is a novice, or at least a person that is starting in their Islam, they would not actually claim, let alone a scholar. So therefore, you had other scholars that defended him, like, for example, Az-Zirikli, who basically said that قيل اتهم باتباع طريقة الصوفية. He said it was said such and such, and he said ورد بعض العلماء هذه التهمة. And he said, and some scholars refuted that and debunked all those claims, and they said, well, if we would know that even a simple Muslim that probably just has simple knowledge about Islam would not claim that, so how is it that we can accuse a great scholar like Abu Abdullah or Hakim al-Tirmidhi to say such a claim? So just wanted to, I guess, let me see, I said it was going to be short, so I'm not really sure if we got enough time. So I'm just going to go right there and continue with Tirmidhi right there. Just remember that. What Islam says about deja vu then? Okay, well, for deja vu doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, it's a French word to mean I had seen this before, or I had heard this before, or it kind of, reminds me of something that happened that is similar. Okay, so, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that this is necessarily something that you had seen in some kind of a dream or anything like that. It can happen that you can see something like this in a dream, okay? And it can be for a mu'min and for a kafir, but it is part of the signs of a person being salih. Maybe, for example, they had seen that this person was going to take the wrong path, this person was going to do this, and then they were probably getting some dreams, and which is called the ru'ya sadiqa, and they were capable of anticipating that this is what's going to happen, and either to take the necessary steps to avoid such a thing happening, or probably it still happened as to what they had basically seen in a dream, or basically got that. So certainly some salihin can get that, kind of like what we had said about the intuition, that piece of it. But when it comes to the deja vu, that let's say you're a teacher and you had seen that certain children, when they're hooked on social media, they end up, let's say, not doing well on their studies. And of course, with your experience, you had basically come to know and come to, I guess, anticipate that the children that are hooked on social media, they end up basically, I guess, having this uh, fall, or at least not doing so good on their studies. And then you see another child and hooked on social media, even though they were A students, but then you're like, okay, I can see where this is going and what's going to happen right now. And based on your experience and based on the previous data that you had, you would anticipate that this person is basically going to have this kind of, I guess, they're going to degrade in their, at least in their advancement, they're going to go back and their grades are going to go worse, etc. So that's when you would say deja vu. So if you're talking about deja vu to really mean based on your experience and based on data, based on research, then that would be completely different than the intuition that we were talking about. Okay, the intuition that we're talking about that the salihin might get, this is not based on data. Okay, this is not based on data. This is more based on just wattaqullah wa ya'lamkumullah, have taqwa and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will teach you. So that would really be coming with the commitment that a person is putting in their deen, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up whether it's ulum or whether it's hikmah, because al-hikmah itself is part of that intuition. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned that the best ilm that anybody could get is actually wisdom, is hikmah. وَمَا يُؤْتَى الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Whoever is given hikmah or wisdom, then they had given the greatest gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so what is hikmah? Al-hikmah is not necessarily an intuition that somehow I got a feeling and boom, right there, a flowery feeling that I got right there. Al-hikmah is recognizing, yes, certainly there's one piece of data and we're capable of making the right decisions probably 10 years from now. And usually hikmah comes with age, because more experience brings in, let's say, a better understanding of where things are going. So you would see a person that is probably 13 years old, they're usually thinking probably within this year, that would be a very Hakim 13-year-old if they're thinking, okay, 1 year from now, what am I going to be? Okay, but if we're talking about a person that's 20 years old, they're probably thinking about, okay, well, I'm going for my undergrad, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get a job, and then they're planning, let's say, 4 years ahead. But then the older you get, your planning is going to be farther ahead. When you're 30 years old, and now you have kids, now you have probably you got married, etc. Now you've got a home. You probably want to plan maybe a mortgage, or probably plan a payment, or probably plan to maybe pay for your car, pay for whatever, probably a good job, etc. Now you're planning probably 20, 15 years ahead. By the time you're probably 40, you're trying to think of your retirement time. You're planning right now 20 years ahead. And probably even older, the older you get, the farther in the time span that you're actually planning ahead. And that's what we could actually see and talk about wisdom right there. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there, inshallah, just at least Abu Abdullah al-Tirmidhi, and hopefully, inshallah, you guys, I know you need to get some sleep, but hopefully, inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow. We're going to do, even if it's half an hour, even if it's 40 minutes, just so that we would stay consistent and not forget where we're at with our tafsir. So that was just a little note, a tafsir, but it was, yes, biography of Tirmidhi, because we stopped at him. So if there are any questions really quick, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah, and then we'll be ending. All right, so we'll end right here. I know you all have to go sleep and get some rest.